Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out. Tonight, the Sugya Shiur, I'm going to discuss as we know, we have the upcoming fast on Friday, Asarah b'Teves. But in preparing for the Shiur, I actually found, I don't know if anybody else knows the background to this, but a fascinating part of the story is the Tisha, the 9th of Teves, which is an amazing story. And we'll go through that in more detail, and then towards the end, because this Tainus falls this year on a Friday, so we'll just cover some of the halachas with regards to fasting, and specifically Asarah b'Teves on a Friday. But we'll go back in time a little bit, just in terms of the broader context, and that is most people, or at least speaking about myself. When we speak about Asarah b'Teves, if you think about all the fasts of the year, Asarah b'Teves really does not get a big shake. And the reason for that is probably because it's the shortest of the fasts, and therefore, in terms of its impact on our nutrition, it has the least amount. On the one hand, one can make a t'nai, which we'll speak about a little bit later on, get up early in the morning, which is not early in the morning. It's even before the time of the actual davening for most people anyways. And by the time you finish your day at work, you are already at home and it's already past Tzeis HaKochavim anyways. So at the end of the day, it's one of those fasts that really, in terms of just time-wise, it's very, very short.
You're skipping lunch.
You're skipping lunch, exactly, and how many people we know doing it. So from that perspective, how much of an impact does it have upon on us? It doesn't have the sort of the fanfare of many of the other. Tanis Esther comes with Purim. You have Tisha B'av, Shivel Shebet Hamas. It falls during the 3 weeks. There's a whole hype that goes into it. You can see where this is an orphan Tainus. But as we will see, just at the very, very beginning, from the very first source, there's one fascinating halacha about Asarah b'Teves, which comes out both this year and last year, which supersedes every single one of the Tainesim, with the exception of Yom Kippur. And that is, if the fast day falls out on Erev Shabbos, then it is done on Erev Shabbos. Not because it's short and it's easy and it's convenient. We'll see why. It's a fascinating idea. So the reality is that we misunderstood or misunderstand the Asarah b'Teves. We just don't give it the sort of the reverence that it deserves, and we'll see a little bit about it. The Beis Yosef quotes. Oh, very good. That's the very first source. That's the very first source we have inside. The Beis Yosef quotes from the Abu Draham. He quotes not only is the idea that Asarah b'Teves will fall out on, if it falls out on an Erev Shabbos, that we would fast on an Erev Shabbos, as we will do Emir Hashem this year and we did last year. But even if you look in the first source, he quotes from the Abu Draham Kasav, the Hilchas Tainis, she'Asarah b'Teves hu mishuna mishar hatanios. It is different than all of the other tanios. Why? She'im hayochal b'Shabbos, if it would fall on Shabbos. Now, it does not happen because they've orchestrated the calendar in such a way that it doesn't. You would not be able to push it off until another day. Now, pause before you look any further. Why not? Why is it that Asarah b'Teves has such a degree that it's never going to be a nidche, and all of the other fasts, minus Yom Kippur, has the status of a nidche? All of them, every single one. And the answer is basically two words in the psukim. The pasuk is in Yecheskel, and we're going to see it in the Aruch HaShulchan as he develops it. But the pasuk tells us be'etzem hayom hazeh. The Torah, the Navi tells us, and we'll see it in the quoted in the next source in the Aruch HaShulchan, but we'll just summarize that in the Etzem Hayom Hazeh, in other words, all of the other fasts are referred to as Tainus, and we'll say it in the Slichas as well. Tzom HaChamishi, Tzom HaRevi, and so on and so forth. In other words, it refers to it by the month that they are in. Tzom HaRevi, Tzom HaChamishi. Here, it refers to it by the day. Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh. So, Kimo B'Yom HaKippurim. Now, Now, this is quoting from the Abu Draham. By the way, the Beis Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, finishes this entry and he says, "Nu v'lo yodati minayin lo hazeh." I don't know where he got this idea from. So the Beis Yosef, on the one hand, quotes from the Abu Draham, but he kind of says, like, I'm not sure where it's all about. Because of Od, he says also, "Asarah b'teibes chal l'pamim b'shishi," that it does fall out on the sisi. Umisanin, and we do fast bo biyom u'she'ar tzomos la'olam ein chalim b'shishi. We never have it that it falls out on the sixth day. So as much as he's kind of on one hand dismissive of it, but the point is, as the Abu Draham mentions and says that if it would fall out on Shabbos, it would. Why? Be'etzem hayom hazeh. So the Aruch HaShulchan, in his beautiful way, usually summarizes things very nicely. So we'll go through a little bit of the background of what is essentially the background to this fast, which we're going to call Asarah b'teibes, and what makes Asarah b'teibes such a, on one hand, like I said, a misunderstood tinus. So, in the second source that we see, Aruch HaShulchan, the Asarah b'teibes shebo samach Nebuchadnezzar harasha al Yerushalayim k'dersiv. So we know that he comes and he approaches Yerushalayim. Essentially, if we look at this as it is the beginning, it's the siege of Yerushalayim, which then the walls are breached on Shivasar B'Tammuz, and the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed with Tisha B'Av. So this is how it plays itself out, and it's brought down in two places. In Malachim, it's brought down in Yirmiyahu as well. שבשנה התשיעית למלכות צדקיהו בחודש העשירי בעשר לחודש בא נבוכדנצר וכל חילו ירושלים, and it's described ויחזקאל שהיה בבבל על גולוס יחניה גילה לו הקדוש ברוך הוא זה בנבואה עשו היום. And here's the nevuah that he gets. ויהי דבר השם אלי בשנה התשיעית בחודש העשירי בעשר לחודש. Right? In other words, very, very specific. Not just the month, but rather right down to the day. That says Ben Adam. Who's Ben Adam? Always is referring to Yecheskel. Ben Adam. Ksav lacha es shem hayom etzem es hayom es etzem hayom hazeh. So at this point, the nevuah comes on specifically on this day, and that is what, of course, where the Abu Draham gets this idea from that we saw previously. Why it has this idea more than any other of the tinios. So continuing in the Aruch HaShulchan, quoting Samach Belach Bavel Yerushalayim be'etzem hayom hazeh kolomar shetziva lo lichtov sham hayom shem hayom hainu hachodesh v'gam hayom hazeh haprati. So what's unique and what's different about this fast is that it is referred to by its specific day. V'kosav be'asor lachodesh Asiri, v'lo yada hanavi al matzi v'lo. The Navi did not know what it's about. Lichtol kain ba'achar kashakasav gila lo da lachaki samach melech Bavel Yerushalayim. So we know that at the end of the day that this is where Melech Bavel is going to approach Yerushalayim be'etzem hayom hazeh on that day. So we'll skip a little bit here because that's just again the rest of the story which we know. Skip to the point that where it's underlined. Ki ba'asarah b'teibes haisa haschalas hatzaros. So. Many times you see this in reference into many places that the beginning, for example, the classic or the best example, the proof. First, let me explain the proof, and then I'll explain to you. First, I'll tell you the statement, then I'll tell you the proof. The idea here is why is Asarah b'teibes perhaps a greater calamity than many of the others? Because it's the beginning of the Peranios. It's the beginning of the Tzara. In other words, the beginning of the siege is going to lead ultimately to. Now, how do we see this? Where can I bring you a proof from that? What day do we fast on for what we call Tisha B'Av? As we know, the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed on which day? It was the 9th, but it only started on the 9th. The real burning took place on the 10th. And that is documented both in history and Gemara, and the Chazal tells us that. And why is that? Because it's the Aschalta. It's the beginning of the Peranios that is always the danger part, and that's always here. So back to our text here from the Aruch HaShulchan, he basically says, this fast, the Asarah b'teibes, is really so important because it's haschalas hatzaras al karchach or imkain kavu latanis ladoras. That's the reason why it was designated for a tainis. V'nimta sham ba'ad kadmonim dil mole hayachal Asarah b'teibes b'Shabbos, and he's quoting here back to the Abu Draham that we saw. It would even take place on Shabbos. Okay, very good. So that's a little bit of background, puts it into context. So we're going to realize that there's a lot more to Asarah b'teibes because of that type of stature. But that's just the beginning of it. So we're going to see now from sources here that Asarah B'Teves comes as a package of what we're going to see as 3 days of fasts. Now, we don't generally fast for 3 days. Even the Gemara talks about Sveika de Yoma. Maybe we should fast 2 days on Yom Kippur, and the Gemara rejects that ultimately and says we can't fast for 2 days. But here there's a...
It says you fast on Tisha B'Av 2 days.
Sorry?
There's a shita that says you should really fast 2 days on Tisha B'Av.
Right, but if you're going to tell me, if the Gemara already says we don't fast on... Because the Gemara asks why... The Gemara in Yuma says, why don't we fast for Sveika de Yoma? After all, we're going to blow shofar for 2 days. We're going to do that. So, okay. But it's interesting that we're going to see. So let's just do, again, a little bit of backup. Now, Megillas Tainis, there are many of these Sfarim that we see that are included. Megillas Tainis is one of them. This, just want to be clear, this is not the Gemara Megillah or the Megillah of Tainis. This is not anything. This is called Megillas Tainis, and it's its own list. And there in Megillas Tainis, you find that it lists all the days in which you're not allowed to fast in one version, and the other one is that you're not allowed to do the opposite. In other words, that you're not allowed to fast, and the other one is that we do fast. This is going to be the case, the things that we do fast. It lists all the fast days that we have. So the Gemara, the Megillas Tainis tells us as follows: Beches b'teves nichtava haTorah Yevanis b'mei Talmai Hamelech. So there was a king by the name of Ptolemy the Fourth, and he wanted the Torah to be translated into Greek. And on what day did this take place? And I think we spoke about this. It's recently it came up in a discussion that King Ptolemy basically took 70 of the Rabbanim and put them into rooms. And of course, the miracle was that they all actually translated it the exact same way, because there are some words, as we know, some phrases that are extremely. If they're not translated in the correct way, then there's a lot of implication. The very first one is Bereshis bara Elokim, how you translate those few words. The mistranslation is going to be, in the beginning God created the world. In the beginning means that there was a beginning, and then God created the world. So it's in the beginning of God's creating of the world. That is how the Ramban, that's how Rashi explains it, and all the Rabbanim wrote it the same way. And a reference to Talmai had a name of I think it was his wife has had the name of an animal. So they all had to be very careful how they phrased those different ones. Anyways, the miracle, and as I once said, the biggest miracle was that they actually said the same thing. Had they put them in the same room, they would have never been able to agree on anything. But they put them in separate rooms. Everything was going to work out very well. Okay, so what was so bad? I mean, this is what's called the Septuagint, right? This is what's a referral to a reference to the Septuagint. So what was so bad? So the Megillah Tainis tells us, because why? Choshech ba la'olam shloshes yamim. There was a darkness that came about this world for these 3 days. Betes bo, what happened on the 9th bo? On the 9th of Teves? Lo kosvu rabosenu al ma. Secret. I have a secret. Okay? And we'll see by the end of the day whether we have a secret or not. And then biyud bo samach melech bavel es yado al Yerushalayim lahachriva. And as we know, so what the part that we know number 8 and number 10. The 8th was that, but nobody ever said, "Wow, we should fast on such a day." This is Megillas Tainis telling us the days that we should be fasting. So we should be fasting on the 8th day because the writing of the Septuagint was a terrible thing in general for the world. On the 9th of Teves, we should be fasting. But lo kasvu rabosenu alma. We don't know why. Okay? And on the 10th we have that. This is codified in the Shulchan Aruch. If we look in the Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim, this is in Hilchas Tanios. B'shmona b'teves nichtava haTorah Yevanis b'mei Talmai Hamela b'hayachoshe ba'olam shloshes yamim. Exactly the Megillas Tainis, word for word. Ubetesbo, and on the 9th of Tat, lo noda eze hi hatzara. We do not know what the tzara was. We don't know. We just don't know. At least that's what it says as follows. Comes the Taz, who, as we know, is one of the Nosei Kelim on the Shulchan Aruch, and he says, "What do you mean we don't know? Of course we know." He says, "How did he know? We'll see." So he says, "We know. Tema Gedola ha Isa b'Slichos." He read Slichos. He had an Art Scroll translation. He clearly knew what he was taught, what he was reading. Unlike, when you don't know what you're reading and you can go a whole lifetime and you don't, you read. But the Taz knew what he read, and he says, what are you talking about? It says very clearly that on the ninth day of Av, who died? Mace, Ezra HaSofer, V'tzarech, and I have a kasha on the Shulchan Aruch. So now I thought it would be a very useful exercise to take out the siddur and look in the text of the slichos that we are talking about. So we have it here below, and this is the slichos that we will be saying even on this Friday, which we normally don't say, but we will be saying the slichos here. So let's read it together. So the translation you have in front of you as well. So the it begins Eskara matzok asher yukrani, right? So I remember in some sort of pain or distress, asher karani, that the things that happened to me. Asher karani b'sholosh makos b'chodesh hazeh hikani. Hashem, essentially referring to Hashem, it gave me three. It's written in the singular, but it's referring to us all about b'chodesh hazeh hikani. He gave me three. He gave me three different blows or something, right? Gidani, haniani, hichani, right? So what did he do? Gidani is to cut down, right? Heniani is to generally would be to push someone, and hichyani would be that caused me pain. Ach ata helani. He translates here, and to the point where exhaustion. De achani bishmona bo smalis vimanis. So I was pushed away on the 8th with the left and the right. Halosh loshtan kavati tainis on the 3 days, the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th, referring to we established a tainis. So far this is very poetic, but now in context of what we've learned, now we understand first of all what this whole thing is about. Otherwise, what are we talking about? So I'm very excited because when I read this Samir Tashem on Friday, it'll actually make some sense now. Okay, we're going to read words that are going to say good. We now have this 3-day thing. And then we go through it. Melech Yavan insani lichtov das Yavanis. So Melech Yavan, now we know King Talmai, was the one who forced me into writing das Yavanis, into translating the Torah. Al gabi charshu charshim herichu ma'anis, right? So because of these things, this is why I fast. Zoamti. So now, betisha bo bichlima v'chefer, I come now in ash and humiliation. Chosach me'olai me'il hod v'tsefer. To remove, comes chosachta me'olai me'il hod v'tsefer. The beautiful. How does he translate it here? My beautiful me'il, right? My cloak, my beautiful toraf, a reference to who? Yosef, of course, right? Toraf Yosef. Bo hanosein imrei shefer, hu Ezra HaSofer. So now we see that who was killed in very poetic and dramatic fashion over here, Ezra HaSofer, on the 8th day. And Yom Asiri Tuvo ben Buzi. Who's ben Buzi? Yecheskel, of course. HaChozeh, the person who's the Navi. Ksav l'cha b'sefer HaMachazeh, who he writes in the Sefer of the Machzeh and the Sefer of the Vision, i.e. Yecheskel. L'zikaron la'am namas v'nivzeh zezam tamayom hazeh. Okay, so what did we just read now? We know what happened on the 8th, and we will read what happened on the 9th. What happened on the 9th was the destruction of the killing of Ezra. No, it shouldn't say the killing. I shouldn't say that. It was the death of, and we'll see why that's an important point. Ezra died. Yeah. He died. Okay. Anyways.
Lots of great people died and we don't fast.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much. Now, who asked that kasha? So I was really excited because this is quoted in this siddur Otzar Tfilos Slichos Asarah in the siddur called Otzar Tfilos. So I looked on my bookshelf and I said, I'm sure I have this thing here. And you all got this as your bar mitzvah present. I'm telling you. Anybody, trust me, you have this in your house. Otzar HaTfilos. You do. It's... that.
Yeah, but what does it say on
the top 3 presents were a cross pen, right. Okay, cufflinks, and an Otzar Tfilos, okay. It's a 2-volume set of, and it's a perush on tefillah, which is a classic, okay. And inside, I was so excited because I opened it up and the binding is still there and it's like terrific. And I don't. It's been sitting there on my shelf waiting for this day. Baruch Hashem. Anyways, so let's read through what he says in his Perush on the Slichos. Okay, so he says like this. B'chol bo, he says over here in the Sefer Kolbo, Simigo uberorchas chaim lahara milunil kasvu betes beteves mahu Ezra hasofer ben Nehemiah ben Chil. In other words, what was on the he says Ezra hasofer and Nehemiah were the ones. B'shalhi looks like Megillas. Tainis niskar shegazru tainis betes beteves besibas hatainis lo niskar sham. The reason for the fast was never mentioned there, right? It was never mentioned in the Megillas Tainis. The kasha lomar, he says it's very difficult to understand, just like Paul said. Shemisas Ezra v'Nechemra ha'isa ha'yesiba hatainis azos. That should be the reason why. How many? First of all, they died naturally. So okay, they died naturally. Moshe Rabbeinu died. We don't see a fast day from Moshe Rabbeinu. And the list can go on from Moshe Rabbeinu ad Moshe Rabbeinu. We don't have that. Kilo matzanu shegazru shum tanios al misas adam gadol elo al harigas Gedalia ben Achikam. So Gedalia was killed. That's a different story. Lefisha oz paska Malchus Yisrael, and also Malchus Yisrael legamre. It was the end. It was the end of the dominion of the Jewish nation. V'haya nechshav kechurban beis hamikdash, and it was equivalent to the churban beis hamikdash. Then he says, "Gam ein lahavin kavan ha'paitan." I don't understand the intention of the paitan who says zo'amti betes bo b'chlima v'chefer. Which is translated is zo'amti is I was reproached on the 9th with humiliation and disgrace. What do you mean? Why is that a disgrace to say that Ezra and Nehemiah died? They died, right? Ezu cherpa v'chlimahi lanu misas hatzadikim. In other words, the tzaddik passes away. Why is that a cherpa to us? Halosof kol adam lamus. After all, everyone's going to die. Va'afilu Moshe Rabbeinu, olav hashalom, meis, even Moshe Rabbeinu. Ve'ef shaloma shegzeras hatanis lo yhoisa b'shvil misas Ezra, elo b'shvil shemisasa paska nevuah Yisrael. Okay, so you want to say the same thing as you wanted to play with for who? For Gedalia. Gedalia, we said that it was more than the man. It was more than the individual. So he says here, Ezra v'nisharnu ketzon below roeh. Now maybe the Bnei Yisrael were like the sheep without a thing. Avol madua lo zichra bosenu Megillas Tainis sham es hasiba azos. If that's the reason, what's the big hush hush?
Yeah.
What's the secret?
Yeah.
Right? Like zeres hatainis. So right. So I mean that's the question. I mean, first of all, like, the reason is, the whole text doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit in with the story of Ezra. And if it is with the story of Ezra, then why doesn't the Megillah say that in the Shulchan Aruch is, we're not going to tell you this is the reason why. Avol Baror Etzli. So he explains here, this is the name of the fellow who, I shouldn't say fellow, the Rav who wrote the Otzar Tfilos, his name is Rabbi Gordon. Shesibas hatainis hi inyan acher, shelo haya ro lefarsmo. There was a reason that they could not tell. Mefarsem, pirsumanei, right? They could not tell everything. And he tells you, you know what? I'm not going to tell you either. Va'ayin b'sefer. Now I'm not telling you. Va'ayin b'sefer ha'avur l'Rab Avraham Bar Chia HaNasi b'shar ha'achron. He tells you where to look. He says it's in that book. Okay, go look up that book, and it's in the back there. Mashakasa b'mu'ura shel hayom hazeh. On what happened on that day, and
that book on your bar mitzvahs.
that's this one I got. He says, "Va'ayin masheheruch bazeh." There's another place I'll send you to. Yabihu, the labor of Menachem Zel. He was the dayan in a place called Korchain, but Pirushal Megillas on his parish. Thank you very much. Now I know why it's sitting on the shelf, because you didn't tell me the answer, right? So you have here the kasha just gets stronger and stronger. You have a text here.
The suspense.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
That's the idea. And he says he notes the kasha that is there, but he says I'm going to refer you to a sefer, an obscure type of a sefer, which we're going to eventually going to look at. Okay, so then we look here over the next page here on the Birkei Yosef, and the Birkei Yosef here also just to elaborate on the question. The Hadover Pashut Degam Had Yodanu Demesu Bo Ezra Nehemia. So now this is for those that didn't want to read it in the small print and things like that. It's in from the Birkei Yosef. He says like this: Hadover Pashut Degam Yodanu Demesu Bo Ezra Nehemia Mimasha Lo Nichtav Al Ma Misanin Yesh Beso Davar. Oh. So davar is always a remez to secrets. Nistar. It's Torah Nistar, okay? It's a secret. But this is not from Rashbi or Zohar, so just relax. This is just one of these stories that we're going to see. So, but whenever you see Sod Davar in the Rambam, for example, when he writes Sod Hashem Li Reyav, this is all stuff that people say. The Rambam, whether he got it in a Sod and things like that. Anyways, again, for a different time. De'i Hatainis Mishum Ezra Nehemia goes, hold on a second. There's got to be something more to the story. Because if the story was all about that Ezra Nehemiah died, then Lichtov lehedya, so then write it explicitly in the Gemara, in the Megillah, Bo al shemes Ezra Nehemiah, keder shekosim b'chol yom hameh. So just write it down. What's the problem? They died, we write it, and we have things like that. But instead, the Megillah, it doesn't tell us what it is. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't tell. Elo midichsov stam, but when it's written in this way, sod yesh ba'inyan. There's a secret here. V'chein mashma midivrei Orchas Chaim, and he quotes us from the Orchas Chaim. Gam ken shekosav. He also lekosvu rabosenu alma v'nistar hasod, and it's a secret. Ubo bayom meis Ezra HaKohen v'Nehemiah ben Chilkiah. Okay, terrific, wonderful. And again, the kein tzarich lomar b'kol boy v'nistar hasod. We're left with the secret. So now, what really happened on the 9th of Teves? This is where we're at right now. So the answer to this question is a fascinating trip that you can take with a lot of scholars and people. This is it's a fascinating, really, and it's sort of from here we're going to go into this area which is highly academic, and I don't pretend at all to be that. I just read an article. I refer you to Schneur. Anybody know who Schneur Lyman is? Schneur Lyman lives in New York, professor, started off at Brooklyn College, Yeshiva University, and anyways, he's a huge Talmud Chacham. He's a tremendous, historian. This is really is an academic. So in this, we're going to explore an area that will, I think, surprise many of how this is going to fit into to this whole context. But it does get into an area which is going to be, as we'll develop it a little bit, more historical in its nature of what happened on the 9th of Teves. So let's go to examine some of these obscure references that were given to us to go look. I mean, that's the lead. That's the only thing we can do. So there is a sefer which is called the Sefer HaKabbalah from the Ravid. This is not the Ravid that argues with the Rambam. Okay, so whenever you have the Rambam, you have always the Ravid arguing on the Rambam. This is not the same person. This is a Ravid, nonetheless. Sefer HaKabbalah we're talking about here, and the Sefer HaKabbalah here, he writes, and I have it written in the. We'll go through it. He says the Amad al Kinor Rabbi Yosef Halevi Hanagid. B'no umikol he says midos tovos shehayu ba'aviv lo chasar elo acha shelo haya anusan ke'aviv mipnei shegadal ba'osher v'lo nosa avel b'neurav v'gava libo ad lahashchis. What happened here? So you see it in the English here. Basically, the Sefer Kabbalah, which was essentially argues that there was a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Yosef Halevi Hanagid, who is the son of a Rav Hanagid as well, and he was killed in the year 1066. His father was Rav Shmuel Hanagid. He was the son of Rav Shmuel Hanagid, and the community in Spain, Granada, potato, were killed then. What does that have to do with anything whatsoever? Mm-hmm. Okay, and more so. This happens in the year, what year? 1066, time of the Crusades, right? Megillas Taanis was written when? Was written way before. Mm. So the argument that is put forth by this idea is that this was the Megillas Taanis was foretelling a future of a rabbi that was going to be killed. So that face that you have is the same face that Rav Shneur Lyman makes in writing about this theory. He basically says, you know what, there are many rabbis, many with greater of names or more popular, or just more eminent or whatever you want to call it, who met death and destruction over the years, and you can list them one after another. Mm-hmm. And we don't have this thing where a Megillas Taanis is going to foretell the future, but the argument goes that they didn't want to write it down because poor Rav Shmuel HaNagid, Rav Yosef HaNagid was going to have to look over his shoulder his entire life. Anyways, so
and you're not supposed to know the date of your death.
At least on the 9th of February.
And right. So the 9th of Teves, he's looking around and going who's walking around behind me? So, but nonetheless, this is one idea that's put forth. Okay. So at the end, again, from like I said, so the experts on this don't weigh in too heavily on this particular one, but it is one of these things that is quoted.
We kind of pile on modern day things that happened on Tisha B'Av.
Correct, but for
we don't say that was the reason.
But for the individual and for this to be but to be able to say that this is what the Megillas Taanis foretold, and that we're not going to tell anybody. Again, it's how also does this answer any of the questions that were asked by Rabbi Gordon in the Otzar Tfilas? In other words, it's still an individual at the end of the day. Yeah. Oh, so you're going to say it was the community of Grenada, not to belittle the community in Grenada, but still, I mean, it's still a community. I mean, how many communities in the Rhine Valley were wiped out in the thing? Okay, so moving on. The Ramah has a Perush on Megillas Esther. By the way, there's a fascinating story about the Ramah's Perush on Megillas Esther, and it came out during COVID, of all places. This is not part of the story, but it's just an interesting anecdote. I came across it. The Ramah. There was a pandemic. There was a pandemic in the time of the Ramah, and people were locked down. They were had to be. They were out of their house and they had to go away. They had to, sorry.
Cholera, maybe, or something.
Well, cholera was a lot of whatever the soup du jour was at that time. There was a thing like that. Yeah. And as a result of that, he could not get he was not able to bring food for Mishloach Manas. So he basically wrote a commentary on the Megillas Esther and sent it to his father-in-law as in lieu of Mishloach Manos. So it brings up so many interesting things, but it came out during COVID, this story, because, that's what people were thinking about. How are you going to do? What are you going to do? So the Ramah was in some sort of quarantine lockdown. What did he do during his quarantine and lockdown? And it brings up the question, can you be Yotzei Mishloach Manos with a non-food item, which is a machlokas between the Matnas Levi and others. So just a fascinating little story. So here's the Megillah, what he says. Anyways, the pasuk says, "Vatilokach Esther Malchuso el Beis Malchuso v'chodesh hu asiri hu chodesh teves bishnas sheva l'malchuso." Says the Ramah, "Nokat zeh hachodesh yoser mikol chodshei hashana lihios shebal halachas gedolos." The Bahag Zal Kosav Kol Yomei Deroy Lisanis. He's referring to our Mishnah that all the days that you are allowed to fast, not allowed to fast. The Kosav Tes B'Teves V'Lo Kosav Al Ma Misanini. It doesn't say why we fast on the 8th day. Why? Ki lo kosvu Rabosenu Tama Lochein Kaimne She. Why? She Machmas Asra Haisa B'Chodesh Ha'asiri B'Chodesh Teves. The day that Esther was taken must have been the 9th of Teves. And because perhaps it's not a nice thing to say about the woman who, again, Queen Esther was going to be taken in to the palace of King Achashverosh, we didn't want to spread that kind of a story, but nonetheless, it remains a fast day for that reason. Okay, take it or leave it. The Taz and the Magen Avram we saw already before. They asked the kasha that it's the death of Ezra, that's what it's going to be. So now we get into some of the more some of the more fascinating part of the conversation. Comes the Tosfos Yeshenim and he says, guess who was born on the 9th of Teves? So when we talked about Nittelnacht, This is one that I did not see prior to that. Nittel stands for, whether it's a tough or a test. Nital was taken from us. Nitle would be he was hanged on that day. That would be the two things here. But here, Nittel Nacht is Nolad Yeshu Tes Leteves. Nolad, he was born. He was born on the thing. Just for reference, just think. Last year, Asarah B'Teves, I think, fell out in and around the 20-something of December. Okay,
Yeah.
so just
It's really conceivable. It's just because it's so late
right.
this year.
This year it's late, but last year I was looking at it on the calendar, but it was in the 20s that it was. So again, now why would that be again such a thing that would be hush hush? Now already we're getting into a little bit closer into what we're going to talk about and spend the next few minutes, which is about who was looking into the Gemaras in those days. The Christians, the censors. They were looking into our Gemaras and things. So they didn't want this kind of a thing. So this is already one of the more plausible reasons why. One of the more plausible reasons why this was just not distributed, not that same. But really, the punchline is going to come from this last source here. The last source here is from Rav Baruch Frankel, who wrote a perush on Shulchan Aruch and Orach Chaim, and on this very siman. If you see look at the Birkei Yosef, Tav Kuf Pei. It's all about Tav Kuf Pei. You on? So let's go through this here together. So Rav Baruch Frankel. So again, just context. This is one of the Nosei Kelim on Shulchan Aruch. We're not talking about some esoteric, book anymore. This is already on the page. Okay. So in Orach Chaim, he writes Masasi b'ksav yad. He says, I found in a manuscript that Shetes Teves, the 9th of Teves, Niftar Shimon HaKalfus. There was a fellow by the name of Shimon HaKalfus who died. Shehoshia es Yisrael. He helped the Jewish people. Mitzara Gedola Bizman HaPritzim. Pritzim here is not, it's the Zman of the early Christians. Nikva Yom Isaso Latanis Olam B'Yerushalayim. You need to have this thing here. Right. So, what's going on?
Same as before.
No. But this story will, if you haven't heard it, will blow your mind away. Okay? Who was Shimon HaKalfus?
One of the apostles.
Correct. Which one?
Simon.
Simon. Who did Simon become? Simon became Peter. Simon Peter. Background. So, okay. So this is the amazing story of tenth of Teves, which seems to fit the bill perhaps the best in the best way. So. There was I don't know if you have it in front of you there, but I have just some brief notes for myself. I don't know if I included that in the handout as well. But basically, there is the legend goes that there is an individual by the name of Shimon Kalfus. So the short version that I'm going to tell you is as follows. The short version is the background first. The background is that at the time that Christianity comes about, when Osa Ish. So first of all, let's go back even further, one step further. Will you find anything of this in the Gemara?
Yes.
Okay. Where?
Sanhedrin.
You'll find it in Sota, maybe in Sanhedrin too, but not in a standard Vilna Shas.
No, because it was censored.
Correct.
Steinsaltz
has it. So if you ever want any of these Gemaras, you go to a Steinsaltz and you will find all of the Gemaras that have been pulled out of circulation. Steinsaltz actually has them all inside. It's interesting why the Vilna Shas never reprinted them. Like today, why didn't they go just put it back in? Like we print Oz V'Hadar, by the bucket every day. So I don't know why, but nonetheless, it was taken out. Now, the story and like the very first the very basic story of the origins of Yeshu, he was a student of Rav Shua ben Prachia. And he was, remember, this living at the time that they were Talmidei Chacham. He's running around with Tanoim. That's who he was with. So the story goes that he made an off comment when he was in an inn and about one of the owners of the inn, a female, and it was off color and it wasn't appropriate. And Rabbi Shiur ben Prachia, banned him, put him in cherem, and said that wasn't very nice. So he comes to apologize to Rabbi Shiur ben Prachia. And like in this week's parsha, like in last week's parsha, why doesn't Yaakov Avinu cry when I'm busy, Kriya Shema, okay? Your son, you haven't seen him in 22 years, davening, I'm saying Kriya Shema, someone had a grudge, right? So he said, I'm saying Kriya Shema. So he came to Rabbi Shiur ben Prachia, and he did this. I wasn't there to watch it, but the story was, he tried to say this, and, but this became that. Right. So when he pushed him off, he said, I'm out of here. Okay, I'm out. There's obviously Correct. All of this started with this thing here. Okay, now, early Christianity, and again, here I'm just please excuse, I'm just repeating what, from an article. I'm happy to circulate the article from Shneur Lyman. It's just a fascinating read. But basically, he says the early Christians were almost indistinguishable from Jews. In fact, there was no differences, really. I mean, their allegiance to Yeshu and to but there was no structured religion at that point in time. So, and that's the origins, of course, of Lam Nashinim Al Isikva, because you could not tell who it was. The Gemara discusses in the context of if a Baal Tefillah gets up there and he says, Modim, Mishakti, no, so you quiet him down. What's Pshati? Modim, Mishakti, so what do you mean? Who's going to get up and say? The answer was that you didn't know who you were sitting next to. Because the early Christianity did not have a structure, a form, a religion of any sort. There was a belief of some sort, but essentially it didn't have much more than that. So that's the backdrop to this scenario here. So what was happening at the time? Jews, Hamoin Am, were associating with people that were early Christians. The beginning, the apostles going out, the 12 apostles trying to spread the word of the gospel, but there is no functional religion other than just basically a new belief outside of God. But these people were putting on tefillin. Some of them were putting on tefillin on Chol Hamoed.
Who would have thought?
It never ends,
So, I mean, they were putting on tefillin, they were shaking lulavim, they were doing all kinds, they were indistinguishable. So the Tanoim at the time saw in this a huge problem, and they did not know what to do. So they gathered around and they decided, what can we do to be able to help this case? So they were in a room of Tanoim, and they basically came up with a plan. And the plan was none other than Rav Shimon ben Kalfus. And he said, okay, the Beis HaMikdash is up and running, by the way. Remember, this is happening in the time that Yeshu is put to death at the year 30 or something, and the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed 70. So the Beis Hamikdash is functional. So he goes into the Beis Hamikdash, whether it was a kohen or not, however it was. So the legend goes, he takes Shema Meforosh and he takes it with him, and he says, "I'm going to go to Rome." He becomes, first of all, Shimon. He becomes a household name amongst the people there. Essentially, what he was going to be was a fifth column. He was essentially going to start trying to work within their system to uproot and to end their system. And his goal was essentially to try to build in such a way that Christianity would no longer look like Yiddishkeit, so that people would be able to say, "You are Christian, we are Jews," and we can differentiate that. But in order to do so, he had to get into their system, and what he is credited with is changing all of their holidays, our holidays, into their holidays.
He's a good guy.
Correct.
Yeah.
He's ultimately the goodest of the good guy. He comes to the Tanoim and he says, "Listen to me, I'll do this, but the sin is on all of you." Right. You know, I'm going to I'll take it for the team. I'm going to go do this, but I'm telling you, I need your haskama. So the legend goes is that they give him the haskama, and they basically, like many, we would say Esther, like Yael, like all these people that before, they take one for the team. They destroy their lives. Eli Cohen, perhaps, you can argue. A lot of these, modern, people that would basically say they will destroy their lives in order to preserve the Klal Yisrael. He rises to the point where he becomes a bishop in Yerushalayim. From Yerushalayim, he gets noted and he becomes Pope. Repeat. He becomes the Pope in Rome, and he converts all of the holidays that we had. So he says you have to replace Pesach with Easter, Shavuos with Pentecost, Sukkot with Christmas, and on the story goes, okay? And they basically, and this, by the way, that I'm telling you, is found in it's called in Otzar HaMidrashim. So there's a source that we have that recounts this entire story. So at the end of the day, the Midrash portrays this person, Shimon Kefa, right? Kalfus Kefa, however you're going to Kippah, depending on where you read and how it's translated. I'm sorry?
That's why the Pope wears
That's why the Pope, it's interesting, that's why the popes have in their robes, they have fish on it. Because Shimon HaKelpa was a fisherman. And in order, so the original, you go tell that now you see the beginning of why this story could not be told, right? You get the story?
Yeah.
Now that you're getting to the punchline,
Cool.
right? So the story basically continues along those lines. Now, just to finish.
Shabbos to Sunday? Was that all?
Yes, and exactly. He moved Shabbos to Sunday. And listen to, and the thing is, this we have evidence for this already. He goes to Rome, and he says, I'm going to live in this tower. I'm going to live, an aesthetic life. I only want bread and water. He didn't eat anything else, supposedly the story goes, and he stays in this tower. And the story, and you said, hey, if you go to Rome, you can visit this tower where Saint Simon Peter was. He was the Pope. And that's where he was, and all the popes subsequently. And he only ate bread. In other words, he was keeping kashrus. He ate bread and water. He didn't have anything else. He didn't have. And the story basically is that he was a person who gave up his entire existence, but essentially created Christianity to be different and with enough deviation such that now we know that's Sunday. This is Shabbos. This is Pesach. This is not Pesach. All of these differences. And for that reason. So now if we know who that person is, the story goes that they could not be mefarsem. They could not tell the story. Right? This they couldn't tell. So the story of the Shulchan Aruch now, so this is how all of these pieces fit together very, very nicely. So at the end of the day, when we read on Friday, we're going to read the story of the 8th of the 9th of Teves, and we say, hold on, what happened on the 9th of Teves? Sure, Ezra and Nehemiah also died, but that wouldn't be the reason why the Megillus Tainus says you have to have a fast for them. But for this individual, Shimon HaKalfus, Shimon Kepa, Shimon Kippah, wherever you read it, this person was a giant, but he mamish gave up his life, his entire thing, but he created. So tell this to a goy. We created Christianity for you because you couldn't get it right yourself. We fixed it.
Enough that he was a Jew.
Right. He's a Jew.
Yeshua was a Jew.
Correct. So
Here's one
Professor
other.
Lemon's take on whether or not this is a myth that has been written up.
no. So he actually says he brings a proof. He thinks that this is actually true. He begins his discussion with a Gemara that I didn't bring down because it's not relevant to us. But the Gemara in Avodah Zarah he brings down. I'll tell you why he thinks it's proof. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah talks about the 3 days before their holidays. You can't do matan. You can't do business with them 3 days afterwards. Okay, you can't do that. And then Rashi there on a comment which really doesn't seem to fit from for any reason. Rashi says he quotes the Sefer Ovadia. And the Sefer Ovadia has it's only about, Sefer Ovadia is one chapter. Somebody here recently had maftar on it, I think, with someone here. It's one chapter, the entire Sefer Ovadia. So the Sefer Ovadia is one chapter, and it refers to Edom. And Rashi makes a comment that it says, out of context in that Gemara, they don't have their own books, they don't have their own letters, and they don't have their own language. What is Rashi talking about?
Romans.
So, yes, it's the Romans, but that's not true. They have all of that. And the answer is no, they don't. Because Shimon HaKalpa, the story goes, is that he is the one who came and introduced into all the letters. They were basically using Latin before, and then afterwards he comes in, he changes all that. He changes their books, he changes their law. So he, to answer your question, he feels that this is a legitimate response. Whereas the first few, right? Certainly he dismisses the idea of the Rav Hanagid, of that. He thinks that that's not Megillas Esther from the story. He doesn't think much of that. The other one we don't have, but this one he feels it fits the puzzle. Right? So again, for the academics that are here, then, you'll find another citation. And also, this is how the Midrash portrays Shimon HaKalfos, right, in light of the thing. If you pull out, let's say, Christian works, is it also the same? There may be some differences, in terms of how they see the story and how their narrative on it is as well. But this is the Otzar Midrashim, and to answer that, he says, yeah, that's a good. That's how he's satisfied with that.
If you just quickly, if you want to read more about this, there's a sefer called Oitzer Bikuchim by Rabbi Eisenstadt, and in that he has a whole chapter on Toldos Yeshu HaNotzri, and he talks about all of this, including the fact that not only did he basically start the religion for them, he is the author of Nishmas.
So hold on, I was going to say something. Yeah, thank you for reminding me. Okay, so shkoyach. So I didn't mention because I didn't bring it down here, but if you look at your note, shkoyach, this is very timely. It's hard to learn with Sydney. No, always knows everything. It's really. You see here where it says Tosfos Yeshenim. So there is another thing here which is called Toldos Yeshu, and that's what you're referring to. Toldos Yeshu. There is a manuscript called Toldos Yeshu. I didn't bring it down here, and in there they attribute. You already. Nishmas was written by the Pope.
As Peter person.
In his
Peter.
disparity.
Okay? Nishmas, there was more. Nishmas, hold on, I'm blanking now. There was a bunch of other things, some other tefillos that were written by the Pope, but Nishmas is the most famous of them that we have. So on Shabbos, when you say Nishmas, and it was the Mechaber was none other than his.
Was it before he did all this adventure? Because why would he bother doing it at this point when he was involved in this?
Could be at the time.
So it raises a big question: why would we have kept it in the liturgy?
No, but remember, in this version of the story, he is a martyr. He's a saint. He's an Adam Gadol, right? No, I understand, but he's a right. I mean, no. So no. I don't know if I have here, but anyways, thank you for reminding me. Yeah, so it's brought. Yeah, he wrote for sure Nishmas and several other works of. Oh, there's another one here. Quote in the Master Vidi. He wrote a talk about interesting. One of the piyutim that we say on Yom Kippur. Okay, Etain Tehillah in Musaf Yom Kippur. David, Etain Tehillah. Was written apparently by the Pope. So I just want to wrap up very briefly. We'll just.
The Tefillah gave references. These references.
So the references that he gives are not. If you look at the references that he gives here, he talks about Rav Avram Bar Chia Hanasi V'Shar Ha'achron, right? So that individual is in my notes here. Shai Bar Chia is that would be the Tosfos Yeshenim. That would be that one there. Baruch Frankel, that comes afterwards. That's the thing there, but it's not clear. Like at the end, who listed which one? But everything was so. But all of those reasons are brought down, and they sound compelling at the end of the day, and it fits with all of our questions. Why was it not written? Why was it a secret? Why was it? Because the church was censoring the works, and of course that had to be thing. Okay, I just want to take a few minutes of your time, 5 minutes if we can, just to run through some very quick halachas with regards to. We'll just do halacha lemaisa. We'll just get bottom line. We're not going to go through the backs and forths, but basically practical halacha when Asarah B'Teves falls out on Friday. the first thing is, what about taking a shower? So the short answer is yes. The long answer is, can you do that on any other fast day? So that's where it's going to be derived from. So if, let's say on Shivasar B'Tammuz, can you take a shower, not a bath? Can you take a shower on?
It's Erev Shabbos.
No, not if it's Erev Shabbos, right? Stam.
Right, no, but I'm saying
because all the others are going to be. There's no other fast except for right.
That's if not.
Right, that's what I want to do. So the longer version of this is, let's go through what it's like for all the other which do not fall out in Erev Shabbos. So the end result, we can start with the end and just work our way backwards. The Mishnah Brura says, Mutarim berechitza, the B'shah Rotz, I'm in the showering part of the halachas of Asarah B'Teves. He says that the B'shah Rotz v'kiblu aleim l'tzom b'chol. What was the point I want to get to? He says here. Where are you? What did you say?
They were never gozer because they knew that the tzibur wouldn't be makabel.
He said like this: this is talking about tefillah. The last line: Im chal yud b'teves be'erev Shabbos. Ein lahachmir berechitza b'chamin mipnei kavod Shabbos. So the question is, what about if it's not Shabbos? That's the question. Right. That's the point. So this would be a question for Shivasar B'Tammuz. But for our purposes, and because time is short, we're just going to cut to the chase and going to say, because Asarah B'Teves falls on Shabbos, so there is no problem whatsoever in terms of taking a hot shower this Friday. No problem. You could turn it all the way up. If it's, let's say, Shivasar B'Tammuz, you want to take a shower, there's a discussion whether you can or cannot. The answer is you can. And should you use hot water or not? The answer is you should not. So that's where it is there. But when it comes to Erev Shabbos, on Asarah B'Teves, bottom line is absolutely. Now, Toa Meha. Toa Meha is, it's kind of so Toa Meha is a real entity. Right? The To'amel Chaim Zachu, there is an inyan of Tei. Now, why is it that there is an inyan of To'amel? We're not talking about a 6-forker with kugel and 18 plates of thing, right? To'amel, according to the Shulchan Aruch, is, look at the Mishnah Brura, mitzvah lit'om mikol tavshil be'erev Shabbos. Why? Kedei l'taknen yafa. It should be properly, fixed, kahogen. Now, why is that so? And he concludes here, Bavada he mitzvah to remez v'remez tohamel chayim zachu, as we say in Musaf Tefillah. Okay, so the question is, why do you have to do it? So with the Inyan is shalom bayis, because you're going to come to Friday night, the kugel is not salted adequately, and people might be a little bit tempered, or so what will happen? You start you don't need this. Taste it before Shabbos. Honey, it needs a little bit of salt. Everything is all salt, terrific and wonderful. So now, can you do this on Shabbos? And by the way, this question also comes up one other time of the year. What? Well, now, but that's right. It comes up one other time in an interesting way.
By Yom Kippur, if the mother is...
in the 9 days, can you eat meat?
Shabbos Chazon. Shabbos Chazon. Shabbos Chazon, if you're having a fleshig meal, can you taste a little bit of the chicken soup right before, during the 9 days? So it comes up in that context. Now, which is a bigger issue? Of course, this is a bigger issue because here you're fasting. There, okay, you had, it's not good, but, things like that. But we'll see here, again, to cut to the chase just because of time, Mishnah Brura tells us here that when it comes to the idea, let's just look at the last line of the Mishnah Brura in the second section. Aval im kedei lekayim mitzvahs to'ameha greda ein lahakel b'tanis tzibur afilu to'em upoleit. So this is a very more I'm sorry, that wasn't the Mishnah Brura. It's interesting. I wanted to do Mishnah Brura first. Too bad. Let me go back. Mishnah Brura is giving a heter. The Piskei Tshuvas, which is a contemporary work, it comes out much more machmir. So let's just go back to the Mishnah Brura. I'm sorry, I misread it. In other words, in a case of a suda. Now, let's say, for example, it comes up, let's say you're preparing food for your children, right? So can you put something into your mouth and spit it right out? So again, you're not eating, Meikar Adin, there would be no problems with that. But Mokam Sodas Mitzvah, once it becomes a Sodas Mitzvah, Shemevashlim B'yom L'tzorach halayla, Yesh Lismoch Adeo Rishona, there are two opinions, as we've seen, Lahatir B'shari Tainisim L'tol Shem Ma'at Ma'at, Im Yesh B'melach V'tavlim Vili Float. So, of course, you can't eat it, but you can put it in your mouth and spit it out. The Piskei Tshuvas, as I mentioned, a more contemporary work, at the end says, I don't like it, we don't like it, we're going to take on a little bit more of the Chumrah. Now, when to end the fast and when to start the fast? I tell you, starting the fast is something that I think needs to be more publicized. Everyone talks about starting the fast. What time you look in the morning and you say, what time is the fast going to start? So now it's going to start what, about 6:20? I don't know, I'm just joking. But at what time is it going to start? Is it 6:20, 6 o'clock? Whatever it's going to be. Whatever the point is going to be. Okay, so now, can you wake up? Let's give me a time. Give me, just so that we can work with the time. What's the time going to be for Friday? Dun, 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 dun. Okay?
Yeah, let's say 6. It's even later.
Whatever. Say it's 6 o'clock. 6:30. What time? We'll say 6:15. How much?
6:39.
6:39. Okay, great. Can you wake up? Okay, 6:19. So let's make it 6:19 just to be more machmer. Wonderful. The point is like this. Can you wake up at 6 o'clock? Okay? Get up and eat.
Something about
Yes, but
6:19.
No, you have to make it tonight and then
Make it tonight the night before.
Isn't that something about mazonos too?
You have to make, this is, like I said, this is not a well-publicized halacha. In other words, if you wake up in the morning and...
But don't you also have to wake up before half an hour before?
Yeah.
So there's two halachas that I want to bring out today.
Tonight,
Halacha number one is, if it's within a half an hour of that time, you're only allowed to eat less than a kabeya. Can't eat more than a kabeya. So you can't have a bowl of cereal. You can have a small amount of a little bit. You can wash and you can have something to rinse out your mouth and stuff like that. That's not a problem, right? You can have a coffee for sure, but it has to be less than a kabeya. So if you're within 30 minutes, if you didn't start within 30 minutes, it's an important halacha, because a lot of times you look at the time, you'll say, okay, if I just have to get up, I just want to down a quick bowl of cereal, I need 15 minutes. No good. You need to have 30 minutes before. And that's not good enough unless you made a t'nai the night before. Hineni muchanim zuman, put it at your bedtime Thursday night, that you are going to make a t'nai that you don't want to. Because in the absence of that,
fast starts.
The fast starts, and then there's not you can drink water, right? You can always drink water, but you can't have that. So it's interesting. Everyone worries about when to end the fast. Starting the fast is actually a bigger chiddush. So you need the 30 minutes and the thing. Two important points.
Why do you need the 30 minutes? Is there not a start time? Why do we have a runway?
I think the reason is because that's the time that you can already to start to daven, and to start a meal within 30 minutes is always a problem.
Like Friday night.
You have a set minion and stuff.
Dawn, you can't start the dawn.
But I assume that that's what it is. It's within that 30 minutes. And also you see that by Kriya Shema, you have also halachas that within a 30-minute time span, you can't get into doing other malachas, things of that nature. Not sure.
But once you start, you can keep eating.
Once you start, you can keep eating right up until the last minute. So advice...
They just don't want you to run up against the clock at the end.
I understand, but okay, so that would be...
How formal does that tonight have to be? You just have to have it in
I don't know. I don't think you have to write it down, but I think it's that kind of thing. Now, again, if let's say you're talking to somebody and you say, I'm getting up tomorrow morning, that's probably a tonight. That's probably good enough. I mean, I don't think you have to have a written sign with 2 Eidim and we think it's going to be the case. Okay, and the last thing we'll just wrap up with is, when does the fast end? So let's say for this Shabbos, someone wants to be a real smart individual. I want to make an early Shabbos, this Shabbos, punkt. I want to daven plug. I want to daven at the plug minyan, okay? It's not early enough. I got to chap a plug minyan. So can you do that? So the answer is, this fast has to go all the way to Tzeis HaKochavim. You already were Kabul Shabbos. You were already everything else we do. By the time you get home, it will not yet be Tzeis HaKochavim, right?
It'll be close.
It'll be close.
It depends where you're done.
It depends where you're done. But the bottom line is, again, you start Kabbalah Shabbos, you get a hungry Baal Tefillah. You start on time because you daven Mincha 2 o'clock already. The point is, you have to wait until Tzeis HaKochavim. Even though you come home from Shul. I'm sure the rabbi will announce all these things
Even if you're
and things like that. Even if you, like which Rabbi Yehuda?
About when then the shmash is better.
Yeah, don't. It's always with someone there. All right, I think we'll wrap up here. Everybody should have a good and easy fast.